This is Ted at Valley of the Dolly. Portugal's housing market is often described in extremes. It's either completely unstoppable or else it's on the brink of collapse. But the latest data from the Portuguese Institute of Statistics tells a very much more nuanced and really a much more interesting story. Yes, prices are on a tear. They're going up at really historic rates. But beneath the headline numbers, we're seeing early signs of differentiation, really policy-driven demand shifts, and now crucially, a meaningful response on the supply side. The number of homes being built is on the rise. So let's look at all of these forces together, and we're going to be given clear signals, not on where the market has been, but where we can really expect the Lisbon home market to go in 2026. So the first thing we know is that there's a record increase in prices in the last year. Nationally, across Portugal, home prices have risen by 17.7%. That's almost 18% a year. So that's really wild to me that prices are going up at that incredibly fast rate, especially when you look at a lot of the studies that are coming out from the EU saying that the Portuguese home market is 30% overvalued. Wow, that is really incredible increases. In the second quarter of 2025, there were 7 parishes that recorded a year-on-year price decrease. And that might be really shocking to a lot of people out there who are assuming that prices in every single parish across the city have just continued to go up. And that hasn't really been the case. And that may seem like a contradiction to the national trend. And the reason it seems like a contradiction is because it is a contradiction. But it tells you that even in a super hot market like you see in Portugal, there are areas of Lisbon that have already reached a point of price maturity, meaning the nation as a whole continues to see these huge increases. But that isn't true in every section of the country, especially in Lisbon. It's really important to remember that housing markets don't turn all at once. They become fragmented. In Q2 2025, in Lisbon, 7 of the 24 parishes recorded a year-on-year decrease in the median sales price. This is something that hasn't been seen since the third quarter of 2021, when the country was just beginning to come out of the COVID lockdown. So what are those key districts in Lisbon that saw a cooling of the housing prices in Q2 2025? Marvila and Arroios, and I actually used to live in Arroios, and it's a wonderful area, but these are really trendy areas that show signs of cooling with falling prices, a change from previous trends that were noted in the econews.pt. I have lived in Arroios, where there is a lot of new construction, and maybe that plays into this factor of slightly falling prices over there. You're also seeing in Parque Nações, as of the second quarter of 2025, prices there had a year-on-year price drop of 8%. In Alveida and Beato, both of these saw price decreases of 2.8% and 2% respectively. In Carnide, that also saw a price drop of 2.6%. So I guess the logical next question is, why are prices dropping in some neighborhoods and going up in others? One of the reasons is because there's an increased supply. There's a large influx of new homes onto the market, and that's putting downward pressure on prices in some of the more popular neighborhoods. And while overall prices in Lisbon are really quite high, especially after all of this rapid growth, some areas are finding more of a normalization now in prices. And in certain parishes, you're now beginning to see these kind of consecutive price drops in those districts we just discussed. And by October 2025, Lisbon's average property price reached a peak of 5,886 euros per square meter. That's almost 6,000 euros per square meter. And that's really at the top end. You had San Antonio, which remained the most expensive at 7,289 euros per square meter. So that's over 1,200 euros per square meter more than the average in Lisbon. Avenida Novas was almost at 7,000, which is again over 1,000 euros more per square meter. And Misericordia, which is really down in that most popular touristed area, that had just a modest increase of 4.3 over the last year. And Avenida Novish, as of October, had a year-on-year increase of just 1.7%. So you're looking at 1.7% or 4.3% for these very popular districts compared to a national increase of 17.7%. So it's incredibly different nationwide versus what you're seeing in these high-priced districts of Lisbon, where they've really reached kind of a price maturity point where you're just over the last couple of years, you're just not seeing those increases in prices in Lisbon representative comparative to what you're seeing nationwide. So what are those localized decline signals that we should be looking for? Well, the first one is price ceilings are being tested, and that's what you're seeing in Lisbon right now. Second, buyers are resisting paying more in an overheated micro market, which we've seen in maybe 7 of these parishes, where you're seeing prices really just not accelerate the way they are nationwide. The prices are really just maturing and you're seeing them stagnate there. Third, it's really kind of an early signs of normalization in the housing market before this kind of normalization appears nationwide. So Lisbon is kind of the canary in the coal mine in a lot of regards, because you're seeing prices slow and that growth in prices slow, and yet nationwide you're seeing the prices, speed along. But likely the rest of the country will follow Lisbon's lead. And this is really how you see late cycle markets behave. It's not really through a crash, but it's really through kind of a selective cooling process. So there are certain districts, certain parishes, certain areas of the country that begin to cool first, and you don't see them increase in price the way you see the national average increase overall. And we're also seeing that existing home prices still lead, but supply is responding to this. So one of the most important data points we're seeing in this report is the growing gap between existing home prices and new housing home prices. Existing home prices rose at over 19% year on year, according to as of the third quarter 2025. But if you look at new home prices, they only rose by 14%. That's more than a 5% gap in the pricing increases of existing home versus new homes. And that tells us two things at once here. The first is that demand pressures remain intense, especially for the existing homes, which is why you're seeing those prices go up, because that inventory is fixed. Second, the pricing power in new construction is easing. Even as construction activity begins to rise, you're seeing an increase in the number of new homes being produced, and you're seeing more pressure on that market to bring those prices down a little bit. And that's really crucial, because in 2025, Portugal saw a sharp increase in new construction activity as developers responded to what's really been years of rising prices and chronic undersupply. But we know that construction doesn't work really fast, and there are long delays between the beginning of the construction process and when those units actually come to market. Most of these homes that were started in 2025, they'll reach the market in late 2026 or 2027. And they will be concentrated in really specific regions and price segments where developers feel that they can make money and where there is a strong demand. Unfortunately, while we have all this increased construction, it will limit further acceleration of the prices. So you're going to see more construction, slowing of the prices, and it doesn't immediately relieve the shortages in homes that we're seeing today, because those units are not coming on the market right now, especially in the affordable segments of the market, which really need additional construction. The next issue really has been foreign demand, and foreign demand has begun to cool as this new supply arrives on the market. So now let's really stop and look at the connection between housing demand and foreign buyers. Purchases by buyers with tax residencies outside of Portugal fell in the last year by almost 17%. So you're seeing a decline in the number of foreign buyers who are coming in and purchasing property in Lisbon and in Portugal as a whole. And this really coincides with the end of NHR as we knew it. And there are also another issue is the new rules that have affected golden visas. And they've really restricted the impact that we've had on the residential property market because you can't just come in and buy a house as part of the golden visa package. It's no longer a component of the golden visa. The proposal to extend the citizenship from 5 years to 10 years before granting citizenship also will probably figure into this as well in the future, and will really give people time to consider whether a move to Portugal makes sense for them. And I think that's really why it was proposed, right? But they did remove the urgency to buy now. And this also really meant that the price insensitive buyer who was buying from a foreign country doesn't really have that urgency to buy anymore. And those high-end purchasers and that demand will kind of ease away now. This matters now because new construction is where foreign luxury buyers purchase property as a rule. And that demand has really been concentrated in that sector of the market. So now, as new supplies begin to come to the market, we're going to start entering a phase where more buyers who are really choosy when it comes to selecting a home and the price that they're willing to pay come to market. They also have much greater price sensitivity. They aren't the golden visa foreign buyer that you saw pushing demand prior. These are buyers who historically are much more price sensitive than the foreign buyer. With this comes a reduction in the speculative pressures on the market. This is why new home prices have been on the rise, but they're rising more slowly than existing home prices, despite increased builder activity. The other thing this report tells us is that we're really looking at a domestically driven, regionally diverse market. At the same time that Portuguese households now account for 88% of all transactions, the highest share ever recorded, this tells us that the market's core is domestic, it's needs-driven, and is structurally resilient. Regionally, Lisbon's share of the transactions as far as value have fell sharply, while Centro, Alentejo, and other regions have really gained ground in the market here. This isn't a weakness necessarily. This is really just a redistribution of where people are buying and why they're buying. And it means they're buying in these other districts because they're more affordable, because of remote work, of lifestyle migrations that are spreading demand across the country. And that really supports prices nationally, even as individual sectors of the market in Lisbon begin to cool. What does this mean for 2026? It means that we're not necessarily, unless the greater economy suffers some kind of horrific crash, if there's a stock market crash across Europe or across the United States or other areas of the world that affect the economy in ways that we're not anticipating right now, it really means that we're likely not looking at a crash. Now, remember, I'm not an investment advisor, and so this video is for entertainment purposes only. And if you're looking or deciding to buy a property, remember that you need to do the research and come to a decision for what's right for you, because the timelines that you're looking at, a lot of these factors determine whether or not now is the right time to buy for you. So remember, in 2026, it doesn't look like we're looking at a crash, but it also looks like we're not going to anticipate another 17% increase in the market. Instead, expect much slower headline growth and price increases. And you're also probably going to see a greater variation between the different parishes and the price points that those properties are really selling for. You're also likely to see maybe greater negotiations in prices for new developments. You're also likely to see existing homes continue to outperform those new developments as fewer foreign high-end buyers come in to buy those new development high-end buildings that are being developed. And construction really acts as kind of a brake, but not a reversal of the market. So yes, it may slow the increases in the price, but it may not necessarily throw them into reverse. So in short, what we're looking for here in 2026 is likely a transition from a really hard acceleration in the prices of the market to more of a normalization in the prices, which is really going to be driven by increases in supply, policy shifts from the government, which have caused fewer foreign buyers to come into the market, and not necessarily driven by any kind of economic distress that is anticipated in the market as of this point. This is Ted at Valley of the Dolly. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give me a thumbs up, and I look forward to talking with you again soon. Thank you. Bye now.